All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. You know what it is. We take your videos that you submitted, we put them up on the screen behind me, and I give you my best feedback on how to do things a little bit better with your lifting. I also apparently only wear this one shirt. It's a great band from Vancouver called Wormwitch. Go check them out. That being said, let's dive right into it. Don't mind the chalk on my hand. I literally just finished deadlifting, but yeah. Let's do some, let's start off with Sean, who we left off with last episode. Now, let's talk a little bit about Sean. So this is 3 reps, 80 kilos. He said this is supposedly 8 RP. So I think a relatively, more like novice intermediate lifter, trying to figure out RPE. So again, I think when it comes down to any advice that I have for somebody trying to figure out RPE is just rate everything. Rate everything, kind of figure it out later, right? The more you practice it, it's like any skill, the more you practice it, the better you're gonna get. I saw a lot of people like, I think it's around this RPE. It's like a 7 or an 8 in a lot of these descriptions for the videos this week. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit before we get started. And that is like, don't worry if your RPEs are off. If you overshoot, if you undershoot, it's not gonna break the program, it's not gonna break you, but it is an opportunity for you to, improve your skills just by rating things, trying it out, trying to be as accurate as you can. And every so often, I think it could be useful to do something like an AMRAP, or like take something to a 10 and see just how accurate your ratings are. Anyways, that little rant aside, let's talk about Sean's bench. So he says that he feels like he could slow the bar speed on the eccentric. He says his max is 92.5 and he's gunning for that 100 kilos, right? That 220. So I think the biggest thing here is not even slowing the descent, but having more control on the chest. And there's definitely a couple different schools of thought in terms of how we're touching the bench press, how it's making contact with the chest. So you'll notice on Sean's bench here, if we watch his chest, we're really kind of sinking into the chest. Now, sinking isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you'll notice one of the things that sinking benchers do really well is they have a stable bottom position. They have a definitive stop as to how much that bar sinks, and they maintain a good amount of leg drive, tension, and overall position during the sink. So if you're going to sink, if you're going to choose to be one of those benchers that allows that bar to sink into you a little bit, it's really, really important that you practice that as a very intentional type of movement, as opposed to like just come down and relax and let it kind of fall into you. So the other side of the coin is, if you want to practice or play around with a light touch, you need to learn to decelerate. Even good sinking bench pressers decelerate to some extent. And the deceleration is basically to kind of halt the momentum into you so that you can hit that consistent touch point. And I think that's one of the biggest things for you to do here. So regardless of whether you're going to be a sinking bench presser or not, I think definitely working on some positional control in the bottom via some long pause bench press, I think is going to be a really, really solid option for you, Sean. So I'd start there. The other thing I'd do is with your leg drive, it looks pretty inactive. So I'd push your knees out. So A, you can get your feet down a little flatter, and B, so you can get some external rotation at your hips, kind of open things up, and ideally apply a little bit more pressure back up the bench, right? What we're trying to do with leg drive is push back up this way. It's going to drive your chest up. It's going to help your shoulder position, all those kinds of good things. Looks to me like our knees are kind of angled inwards, and often that's not the tightest or strongest position. So, all right, that is Sean's bench. Anyways, up next is Darius. So Darius, has been powerlifting for 1.5 years. He says he doesn't have a coach. He hasn't competed yet. And his deadlifts, he feels like his most inconsistent lift. So this is a top set of 475 for 5. So obviously Darius has gotten pretty freaking strong without a coach and without competing. I mean, 475 for 5, that's a good pull, dude. He says it's about a 7.5 RPE. So right off the hop, I like your start position. I like the fact that the bar's coming to a dead stop. I give people crap for that all the time on Form Check Friday when they're doing that bouncy deadlift stuff. And it's like, well, why am I weak off the floor? I don't know, because you never practice it. The biggest thing I think you need to work on in terms of consistency, because that was the sort of thread through your whole email, was like, yeah, I have some days that like are really good and some days that are really bad, and I just can't seem to figure out what makes them, consistent. So I think when it comes down to consistency, it's all about this moment of initiating the lift. See how you kind of like jack into it a little bit? I don't think we're creating tension as you work your hips down and as you wedge in. I don't think we're creating enough tension with that wedging movement, right? We're kind of wedging in, we're getting there, we're like going through the motions, but I want you to be starting to tighten that upper back. I want you to be starting to press against the floor with your quads as you actively pull the hips down and really like lever yourself against that bar, right? People call it a wedge for a reason. You want to be working like against yourself to get into that position in order to create tension against the bar. So I think that's probably the number one thing, is like if you can get more consistent with that start position and how you're wedging yourself in, I think that's the money. That's where you're going to have more consistency and you're going to find more success in that consistency. So I hope that helps, man. And go compete, my dude. Go compete. You're strong as heck. Go compete. Just do it. Even if you don't feel like you're strong objectively, or you look at records or whatever and you're like, oh, I'm not strong enough to compete. Oh, compete. All right. One thing I've had this conversation with a few people, and it's like, people want to like dedicate their lives to this stuff and really like be a power lifter and go all out on powerlifting. But I feel like there's an element of competition that like, unless you know that you like it, like I really hope nobody's wasted their time and trained and then gone and done a powerlifting meet and been like, oh, I don't really like this. Now, I would say almost 10 times out of 10 in my experience, people go to a meet and they're just like reinvigorated and it just lights a fire and they get so stoked and so much more motivated. And I think that in and of itself is a really valuable way to like reignite motivation or to further like push yourself and give yourself something to work towards. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I'm a competitive powerlifter, so I can't say enough good things about competing in powerlifting. But for those of you out there who are interested or on the fence about it, do it. Just do it. Or whatever that meme is from like 8 years ago. Just boomerfying myself, showing y'all my age. Anyways, up next is Bailey. Bailey's doing some squats. 3 at 85%. This is 300 pounds. So Bailey says he's been doing lots of SBD work pretty much always, but just getting back into like pushing strength training as a goal after some time spent doing CrossFit, which I think in his email he called a sickness. So yeah, these were the first reps he said that actually kind of felt good getting back into the swing of things. So let's take a look. I think out of the corner of my eye, from what I can tell, these actually look really solid, man. I don't know that I would change much on these. So in light of that, because I'm not going to give you any advice, I will point to some things that I think Bailey's doing really well here. So we can use this as a learning experience regardless. So first off, his descent, he's breaking at the hips and the knees at the same time. I see a lot of more novice lifters just break at the knees and they try to stay really upright. And then as they get into the bottom, the chest falls and the bar rolls and then the hips shoot up and it's this big, like everything kind of moves this way, right? That's my recycling arrow. But that's the opposite of what you want. So breaking at the hips really well, good solid depth, a lot of control in the bottom. We're not seeing things change or shift. We're not seeing his knees shoot back and his hips shoot up. Nice even pressure on the feet. He's keeping that bar locked in on his upper back. So yeah, Bailey, really nice squats. Literally keep doing what you're doing. I don't think you need any big technical corrections. All right, now we have Robin doing some bench. So Robin's been training for a bit over a year. This is 5 reps. He called them 2-second pauses. So we're gonna hold you to that. RP 7 to 8, and he says he's tall, so he's having trouble with like bench height and etc. Which, yeah, man, I think everybody has trouble with bench height out of these racks. Unfortunately, these are really common at commercial gyms, but they're a pain in the ass to use because one height is way too high and the other one is like you're doing a half a rep. Oh, it's one of those little swingy ones. They have some of those at Fortis in Toronto. Those are decent. So yeah, it could be worse, but still not ideal. All right, so the biggest thing with your bench, I would say your unrack actually is pretty damn good. And I think part of that is by virtue of having this, like, watch this arm right here actually swings out. It's kind of a cool bench design, honestly. It's like a little, almost like a monolift kind of vibe for the bench press, which I dig. I think that's a great thought, a great invention. It minimizes the need for handoffs because you're able to get into a really good position and have the rack out of the way, but also pull it out here into a stronger position before you're having to unrack it. And then you don't have to unrack it from back here, and you don't have to swing it out here so that you're not hitting the rack as you press back every time. It's smart. It's smart. SMRT. All right. So unrack's actually pretty good. I don't think your unrack is lacking. Now, we come down here, and again, we got a pretty hard touch bench, which again, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of change my tune on these. I think most of the time in the past, I've almost always recommended a soft touch, but I've been doing this long enough to see that there are many different ways that people do this. So I'm not gonna right off the hop recommend a soft touch. What I will recommend again is more control on the chest, right? One of the things that's happening is as you're hitting the chest, this elbow kind of flares back out behind the bar. And at that point, you're gonna have to get your elbow back in so that you can press the bar back off your chest, or you're gonna end up pressing like this with your elbow like leading back, and your shoulders are gonna come out of position. So with that, yeah, we're getting that little bit of like leg drive jolt to get it back into position, but I can see you're really tucking to start with, and then as you hit the chest, you're flaring already. So I would maintain a little bit more tuck. We want the elbows just slightly in front of the bar, so that as soon as you apply pressure upwards, the bar is naturally gonna kind of list back, because the sort of ideal bar path for the bench press is a slight back and up movement. And I think what'll happen here is if the elbows end up getting out here, the bar is gonna kind of list or lean out away from where you want it as you press. It's gonna get harder and harder to get that good bar path. And it's also usually indicative when we see the elbows flare out like that. Watch my shoulders. So elbows are tucked in, we're in a good position at the bottom. Elbows flare out. Like in order for the elbows to flare out, we're seeing some elevation in those shoulders. We're seeing that shoulder position sacrificed a little bit. So that would be probably the biggest thing I would work on, Robin, is I would worry much less about your unrack. I think it's fine. And way more about keeping that upper back tight, keeping your elbows kind of tucked in a little bit. And sorry, I said we were going to hold you to these 2-second pauses. I want to see if that's actually the case. 1, 2. Ooh, all right, all right. 1, 2-ish. 2 count. 2 count. You call those 2 count, I would say. Because I would also say 2 count can be like 1.5 seconds, right? Count is a human measurement. It's somewhat flexible. All right, so up next is Sam. So he's focusing on getting closer to the bar, like keeping the bar closer to him. He's raising his hips a little bit and not taking quite such a wide stance. So this is 110 for 5, RPE 7 to 8, and this is his first time using mixed grip. So I think these look pretty damn solid. I think we could narrow this up even a little bit more, honestly. And that way you'd be able to bring your grip in right to the edge of the knurling. And yeah, you might be in a little bit of a better position. You might be able to get just slightly more upright off the floor without dropping your hips too low to the point where you're squatting it up. Right, so I would say this first rep, we're almost back in that habit of like sitting down too far and trying to squat it up. I think it gets a little bit better throughout the set. Yeah. So like there, we're a little more wedged in instead of sat down. And that's how I want you to think about it. Like, think about pulling your hips down while you're pushing the bar away, while you're pushing the floor away. You're doing a good job of keeping the bar nice and close to your shins. I like that. But yeah, I think we need to work on getting that hip height kind of dialed in. And I also think slightly more narrow in both the grip and the stance is going to allow you a little more room to kind of mess around with how you're positioning the hips. So yeah, overall, I think that's definitely improved though. Okay, so this last one is Aline. E-L-I-N-E. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Aline, I'm going to say. And she's been powerlifting for about a year. She says her hips shift to one side and that the bar twists a little bit. This is 82.5% for 4. And what I want is I want to poll our audience, and I want to ask everybody what they think of this squat. Now, are we seeing hip shift to the point where it's a concern? Are we seeing bar twist to the point where it's a concern? And if so, what are the steps that this lifter should take to try to correct those things? What are things that maybe you've done in the past to help correct these things? So head down to the comment section below, help us out by leaving some constructive criticism for our last lifter here. And also, before you take off, real quick, just want to make a quick appeal to y'all. If you like the content you see here, think about heading down to the description box below and checking out the Calgary Barbell Training app. It's a pretty fantastic log of our programs. So basically, it's a really cool app you can use to track your training. You pick one of our programs, load it into there, and each day you just you populate your calendar with the app's programming, and then you can log all your RPEs. It'll help you keep track of all your metrics and your estimated maxes and all those kinds of things, help give you load recommendations if you're struggling with RPE. And it also comes with our access to our app users exclusive Discord, which I'm in pretty much every day, answering programming questions, doing literally these videos exclusively for those users. So not only do you get the programming, but you get form checks like this, eyes on your lifts at all times, from myself and the other Calgary Barbell coaches, as well as a giant program library that's continually being updated. So anyways, that's enough of that. But if you like what you see here and you want to help us out and support the channel, the app goes a long way. So think about it, and we'll see you next week for Form Check Friday. Regardless, thank you for watching, and have a good weekend. Bye, everybody.